This video is brought to you by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with more than 19,000 courses. Right now, the first 500 people to click the link in the description can get 2 whole months of Skillshare for free. According to official company statements, Ronald McDonald is second only to Santa in terms of recognition. While this may or may not have been true at one point in time, you might have noticed that of late the formerly prominent fast food mascot has almost completely disappeared from the limelight. So how did Ronald McDonald come about in the first place, and where has he disappeared to in recent years? The original idea behind the character of Ronald McDonald was more or less to just capitalize on the popularity of the iconic Bozo the Clown, with initial efforts on this front simply advertising on that children's show in the Washington, D.C. area. When this succeeded in getting kids to drag their parents to McDonald's in 1963, McDonald's decided to create their own similar character, with the first to portray the Bozo knockoff being none other than Willard Scott, who would later go on to much more prominent fame for his decades of work on the Today Show. Wanting to expand the character, McDonald's hired the Ringling Brothers clown Michael Polakovs, better known as Coco the Clown, to redo the look of Ronald McDonald. You see, at the time, Ronald's garb featured a cardboard tray for a hat and a paper cup over his nose. Not exactly primetime material, is it? What Polakovs came up with is the now iconic look of the character. With this, Ronald McDonald, well, he was ready for the big time, at which point Scott was promptly fired from the role in 1966 and Bev Bergeron was hired to take his place. While you'll often read Scott was fired for being too fat, which would be kind of ironic if true, this seems unlikely, as Bev Bergeson had many more tires in his trunk than Scott did at the time. From this, it seems more likely that Bergeson was probably hired as he was vastly more qualified for the role, with an extremely impressive resume as an entertainer, magician, and of course a clown. In fact, later in life he would actually receive a Lifetime Achievement Fellowship Award from the Academy of Magic Arts and Sciences. So speaking of that switch, officially McDonald's publicly only recognizes 9 men as having played the character since the 1960s when he was created. Or to put it another way, if McDonald's is to be believed, more men have walked on the moon than played Ronald McDonald. The reality, though, is that hundreds, if not thousands of actors have portrayed Ronald over the years, with said actors usually being tasked with being the Ronald for a specific area or a set of specific McDonald's restaurants. Save for a few scant references to the handful of men known to have portrayed Ronald in an official capacity, McDonald's as a company otherwise insists that Ronald is real, and that there is indeed only one of him. Towards this end, the company has rules in place that prevent 2 or more Ronalds from ever appearing in costume at the same place at the same time. That is, save for a secret conference the company holds for Ronalds that it refuses to admit actually happens. In an attempt to catch McDonald's out, the Baltimore Sun once reached out to the company and asked how Ronald seemingly appeared in so many places at once if there was only one of him. In response, the company issued a statement they claimed was from Ronald himself, which read, "If I told you all my secrets, they wouldn't be secrets anymore. Let's just say that between you, me, and Santa, it's magic." This means it is the official position of McDonald's as a company that not only is Ronald McDonald real, but that he has magical powers. So as to not to break the carefully crafted illusion that Ronald is real, men playing him are forbidden from disclosing their real identity in costume, and even from taking the costume home with them. As an idea of how seriously the actors playing Ronald take this, we're aware of at least one example of a Ronald being detained by police as a direct result of the no admitting you're just an actor while playing Ronald policy, which was handed down by McDonald's. Specifically, after an actor in his full Ronald McDonald costume got into a minor car crash in Michigan in 2000, they were temporarily detained after being asked to give their real name and hilariously refusing to respond with any other name than Ronald McDonald to the police. In addition to being expected never to disclose that they're just an actor playing a part while in costume, out-of-costume actors who play Ronald similarly aren't supposed to acknowledge that fact, instructed to refer to themselves as Ronald's helpers when asked what their job is. Understandably, given the character's position as the face of their brand, McDonald's takes the training of prospective Ronalds incredibly seriously, putting anyone wanting to don his iconic outfit through an extensive and grueling training program. While this training program has evolved somewhat over the years to reflect the changing climate surrounding the brand and its products, more on that in a moment, it is mostly the same as it was back in the 1970s and follows the rules and guidelines set out in a book which is titled Ronald and How. This was penned by a former Ronald named I.J. with the help of advertising executive Roy Bergold. At this point, Jay was serving as the company's boss clown, a role that mainly involved overseeing the hiring and training of other Ronalds. As you might have guessed from the title, the book teaches actors everything they need to know about being Ronald McDonald. For example, along with containing information about the character's history, Ronald and How gives practical advice on everything from applying makeup to walking around in those ridiculous shoes. The book also teaches Ronalds how to interact with children in a non-creepy way, which, let's be fair, when playing a clown is kind of a difficult task. For example, given the rampant stigma against strange men interacting with random children, the book carries a stark warning never to initiate a hug, instead suggesting Ronalds respond to a child trying to hug them by turning to the side and patting the child on the back. With this in mind, it's probably not all that surprising that prospective Ronalds are also subjected to extensive background checks. Ronalds are also constantly tested on their suitability for the role by official Ronald trainers who are given the power to fire a Ronald on the spot for any reason if they don't measure up to the exacting demands of the company. Amazingly, these trainers also have the power to put actors playing the character on Ronald probation to let them know that they literally need to get their act together. According to Jeffrey Giuliano, who played Ronald for about a year and a half in the late 1970s, one of the more unusual rules they have to follow is never eating McDonald's food in costume. This is reportedly because it might smudge their makeup. Giuliano has also claimed that he was forbidden by McDonald's brass from informing children how McDonald's hamburgers were made. Instead, if a child asked where these hamburgers came from, he was instructed to give a stock response about McDonald's burgers being grown in patches where they are picked whole. This was presumably done as to maintain consistency with a series of McDonald's ads from the early 1970s aimed at children, which claimed that hamburgers grew in a special patch in a place called McDonaldland instead of being made by slaughtering approximately 500,000 cows every single year. According to canon established by the ads, McDonaldland is a place where McDonald's food grows naturally in a world being populated with things like French fry bushes, which we personally think is a better name than potato plant. There are also trees that bear piping hot McDonald's apple pies and volcanoes filled with milkshakes instead of lava, which would have made the whole historic destruction of Pompeii a lot more fun. One can only imagine how Pliny the Elder's supposed fortune favors the brave statement might have morphed if that was the case. As you might have guessed, Ronald McDonald hails from this magical land, and throughout the 1970s he seemed to be able to travel between it and our own world at will somehow. As time went on though, Ronald was shown visiting McDonaldland less and less, with modern ads and promotional material suggesting that he had seemingly decided to live in our world permanently. A fact that segues nicely to the training of more recent Ronalds. You see, in recent years, McDonald's has been attempting to rebrand Ronald to distance themselves from accusations that the character exists only to peddle junk food to children, with some even going so far as comparing Ronald McDonald to the old Joe Camel cigarette ads, which, while not officially aimed at teens, studies showed that a full 1/3 of teen smokers in the US chose to smoke Camel cigarettes before the less comic-like version of the character was phased out because of the public backlash. In an attempt to get around similar negative PR but still keep their iconic mascot, McDonald's has recently pushed Ronald as an advocate for health instead. A thing worth noting is that according to McDonald's, Ronald's goal has never been to sell McDonald's food, but to promote the values that the company considers integral to its brand. In fact, officially, Ronald's position within McDonald's is that of a national spokesman. McDonald's maintains then that Ronald is merely an ambassador for goodwill and happiness, and that his main concern has always been fun as well as educating children about important subjects such as fire safety, exercise, health and hygiene, anti-bullying, self-esteem, and literacy. Of course, many of these lessons take place inside McDonald's restaurants, not to mention all of the ads with Ronald where he's clearly trying to sell McDonald's food to children, but apparently we digress. The first rumblings that McDonald's were considering ways to revamp Ronald came about in 2002, when rumors began circulating that they were going to reduce the visibility of the character in promotional material in the wake of sustained negative coverage of the brand and accusations that it was playing a role in childhood obesity. While McDonald's did admit that the character was going to play a reduced role in advertising, top brass in the company stated that the reason for this was due to research suggesting the character didn't resonate with children anymore, with one executive noting simply, "He reminds me of Mickey Mouse. Iconic but dated." The kids have moved on. A year later, in 2003, McDonald's began trying in earnest to revamp Ronald's image, announcing that the character had been promoted from mascot to Chief Happiness Officer, a new position created just for him. Exactly what, if any, duties a Chief Happiness Officer has aren't really clear, with one McDonald's executive noting that Ronald doesn't even get paid, and further noting about the question of Ronald's salary, Ronald doesn't go out to work, he goes out to have fun. In truth, it would appear from accounts of former Ronald McDonald's that the gig pays anywhere from about $40,000 per year up to nearly $500,000 per year, depending on what district one is assigned to, how prominently McDonald's chooses to use you, etc. In fact, the top Ronalds reportedly even get their own fancy office with secretaries and bodyguards to boot. Apparently, the latter are necessary, as older children sometimes like to throw things at Mr. McDonald, and some adults also behave badly towards him. In any event, in 2005, McDonald's pitched Ronald as a global ambassador of fun, fitness, and children's well-being, releasing a series of ads showing him tearing it up on a snowboard and juggling fruit. These ads coincided with a fundamental shift in how McDonald's trained Ronalds, with the company making it known that anyone who wanted to play the character now had to be fit enough to sell the idea that he could do anything that Ronald did in the ads. According to insiders, McDonald's went as far as to straight up fire longtime Ronalds that it felt were too out of shape. At the same time, the company also began training Ronalds to give basic health and nutrition advice to children, as well as to teach games that doubled as exercise. However, to ensure uniformity amongst Ronalds, the advice they are able to give is limited to stock scripted answers handed down by McDonald's, and Ronalds are under strict instructions to never ever go off script, being told to tell any curious children or adults asking questions they don't have a scripted answer for to ask someone wearing normal shoes. Following this and the somewhat lackluster response from the public to this change, McDonald's once again slowly began downplaying the role of the character in advertising, occasionally responding to comments and queries about Ronald's continued status as the company's mascot by saying that while Ronald was still around, he was focusing his efforts on promoting Ronald McDonald House charities. And here we should note that while Ronald was less visible in McDonald's advertising, the company still has hundreds of official Ronalds on its payroll across the globe to promote the brand in person and at various events. Unwilling to let go of the character, however, in 2012, McDonald's decided to revamp Ronald yet again, quietly hiring Tony Award-winning designer Anne Hold Ward to secretly work on updating his look. Unveiled to the world in 2014, the new Ronald ditched his old yellow jumpsuit for a goofy-looking shirt and bow tie combo, accessorized with a garish red blazer. This change in look coincided with an announcement from McDonald's that Ronald would be taking an active role on social media and that he was looking forward to hearing feedback about his new outfit. Now, McDonald's claimed that his foray into social media was a huge success, but his outfit was not exactly popular. On the day that it was announced, the top trending phrase on Twitter was "not loving it." Commenters additionally noted that the change came off as more desperate than anything else, and that it was clear that the company had attempted to make Ronald look, well, less clown-like. In addition to giving Ronald a new look, McDonald's announced that he was setting out on a global mission to rally the public through inspiring events, a fairly nebulous goal the company declined to elaborate on. Ronald, however, did, being quoted as saying, "Selfies, here I come. It's a big world, and now wherever I go and whatever I do, I'm ready to show how fun can make great things happen." Since then, at least according to McDonald's, Ronald has basically spent his time doing what they as a company claim he's always done: tout the benefits of an active, healthy lifestyle to children worldwide. In fact, if McDonald's are to be believed, along with not paying Ronald, apparently Mr. McDonald has literally never taken a day off since he joined the company in 1963, save for a brief period in 2016 when all those creepy clown sightings happened. In response to these events, McDonald's released a statement noting that Ronald would be limiting the amount of public appearances he made due to the current climate around clown sightings in communities. Officially, as of 2018, Ronald is still very much, apparently, a slave labor employee of the McDonald's Corporation, and the company maintains that he's not only real, but have acknowledged that he possesses both magical powers and is presumably immortal due to the fact that they've noted he will likely continue to serve in his role as a brand ambassador, spokesman, and advocate for a healthy lifestyle forever. And so far, he has never seemed to age. And so just to recap, rather than admit its company mascot is just a series of guys in a costume, McDonald's instead maintains that one of their employees is actually an ageless magical clown hailing from another dimension that can bend reality, space, and time to his will and tries to attract children to his abode. A fact that would be hilarious if it wasn't also the exact plot of It. And speaking of marketing, maybe that's something you'd like to know more about. Maybe a magical clown would be right for your business. Or, you could actually do something more serious like copywriting or email marketing. Those are probably a touch more sensible. And those are things that you can learn way more about on Skillshare. As I mentioned at the top of this video, Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands and thousands of courses. They have classes from design to business to technology and much, much more. So a lot of online learning platforms, they charge you by the course, which can get really pricey after a while if you like learning. Premium membership though with Skillshare lets you dive into any course you want, so you can learn all the marketing you want, or other stuff like technology, game design, security, data science, or even culinary skills or languages. There's really a great deal to learn, and we figure you like learning because you're watching an educational YouTube channel, which is why Skillshare is such a great fit here, and certainly something you should try. Learning new skills, it's one of the most important things you can do to get ahead in life, and Skillshare makes that super easy and super affordable. Since Skillshare is sponsoring this very video, the first 500 people to click the link in the description below will get 2 entire months of Skillshare for free. Just give it a go, I'm sure you'll love it. And now let's jump into some bonus facts. In 2015, McDonald's similarly tried to update the look of another famous mascot, the Hamburglar, with a less than stellar response. Like with Ronald, the company absolutely maintains that the character is real, and when asked to explain his absence from any McDonald's advertising up to that point, a spokeswoman from the company claimed that he'd simply been lying low and living a quiet life until that exact moment. Speaking of burglaries, in 2005, a 22-year-old man by the very name of Ronald McDonald robbed a Wendy's fast food restaurant, stealing the money in the store's safe. He worked at this particular Wendy's at the time. And now for another bonus fact. About 3 billion pounds of potatoes are used to make McDonald's fries every year, which is about 8% of all the potatoes grown in the United States, or around 0.5% of all potatoes grown everywhere in the world every year. Also of note here is that the average cow has about 200 kilograms of usable meat, which is enough to make about 4,500 hamburgers at McDonald's. Now for another bonus fact. If you've ever wondered why there is often a second capital letter in surnames starting with Mac or Mc, this is because Mac and Mc are prefixes that mean son of. Early inconsistencies in records are what led to having both Mc and Mac prefixes. Mc is just an abbreviation of Mac, and both can actually be abbreviated further to the far less common M. So someone with the last name of McDonald is sort of like someone with the last name of Johnson. Likely each had ancestors with the name of Donald or John respectively. From this you can probably see why Mc and Mac names typically contain a second capital letter. Since proper nouns are capitalized, you would write son of Donald capital D and not son of Donald little d. In the same way, you would usually write MacDonald rather than MacDonald with the little d, but there are obviously some exceptions. Surnames have been around so long that sometimes they get changed, and in some families the second capital letter it was just gotten rid of. There was also a prefix for daughter of, but these mostly fell out of favour. The daughter prefix was Nuc, short for the Gaelic Naichen Mich, Surnames for women like McDonald were fairly popular in the 17th and 18th centuries, but after that time there were only a few secluded mentions of them. To a lesser extent, Vuk was used to denote grandson of, so that a person would have two surnames like John McDonald McMaster, for John being the son of Donald, who in turn was the son of a master of some sort, but this tradition was never very popular and is not prevalent at all today. So I really hope you found that video interesting. Just a reminder to go check out Skillshare. There is a link in the description below. And if you did like it, do subscribe to this channel for brand new videos every day of the week. And check something else out, just click a link on the screen now. Some other videos up there, as well as linked to in the description below. And as always, thank you for watching.